Pillow talks taxes. He has been for over 45 years. There isn't a human on the planet with more experience solving tax problems on behalf of taxpayers. He wants to solve your problem whether you know you have one or not. If you do have a tax problem, call the office or visit our website, TaxHelpOnline.com. If you don't currently have a tax problem, your problem is the tax system itself. So let's get into the tax policy issues of today. A week ago or so, we talked about the idea of the president sending IRS agents to the border to help with immigration enforcement. We thought it was a joke. Is it a joke? Is he doing this?
Well, they're not sending agents to the border, Josh, wearing Kevlar vests and carrying their M16 rifles around. That's not what's happening. But I have a letter here from the newly confirmed Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, that she wrote to Scott Bessent, who is the newly confirmed Secretary of the Treasury, asking for his help with certain qualified people in the Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service to help with Homeland Security's challenge to secure the border. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go there with Kevlar vests on and carrying M16 rifles. Secretary Noem is looking for from the IRS and from the Treasury Department are talented individuals that can help bring down the financial empire that these gangs and these human traffickers have set up. So specifically, they're going to be looking for resources to dismantle the financial networks that set up the human smuggling rings and the sex trafficking rings. So they're going to be looking at that in particular. They're also going to be looking at the use of Treasury agents to seize financial assets of these criminal rings. Under the United States' forfeiture laws, Josh, any property that's involved in the commission of crimes, not just the people, but the property that are involved, can be forfeited and seized to the U.S. government. They're going to be looking at monitoring financial transactions through the networks that have been set up. They're going to be looking at ways in which to enforce our immigration laws with employers. So what employers are out there that are engaging in unlawful hiring practices? This is something that people need to be aware of. It's illegal to hire illegal aliens. And you know, most people know that, but businesses do it all the time because these folks, generally work for less money and they work off the books. And this is not new, by the way. This is something the IRS has been doing for years.
I was just gonna say they're gonna give him the Capone. That's how they got Capone, is they said they sicked the IRS on him. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what universe they are. Even the Joker from the Batman series is afraid of the IRS.
Well, I'll tell you something. When Iraq fell after the Second Gulf War, 2002, 2003, as soon as the military situation stabilized over there, they sent in the IRS. And I remember writing an article about this years ago. If you think the United States military wreaked havoc on Iraq, wait until the IRS gets a hold of them. And they sent the IRS in specifically to track the money that Saddam was stashing and where did he put it and who got paid and what were the kickbacks and all the rest of that. And so they sent in IRS auditors to find all that stuff. And of course they
follow
did.
the money.
That's what
the IRS is good at, is following the money.
They can follow the money, Josh. They got trained professionals to follow the money. And so we're going to see now a stepped up targeting of employers that are engaged in unlawful hiring practices, specifically with these folks that are coming across the border. So that's what the IRS is going to be doing. As I said, they're not going to be walking point on the border with their M16 rifles, but they're going to be sitting in their offices with their green eye shades and their table lamp and their calculators, and they're going to be tracking the money.
I would like to point out that not for lack of M16s, there's been a couple of reports out there that the IRS has one of the biggest arsenals in terms of law enforcement. Why do they have that?
Let's break that down, because that really was blown out of proportion. We saw during the Obama administration an appropriation for guns and ammunition, 9mm ammunition, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of rounds of 9mm, and people started freaking out. What are they going to do? They're going to be breaking down doors and shooting people for not keeping their receipts and canceled checks. That
never happened. It never happened, right? So
there's three fundamental divisions of the IRS that interact with the public, all right? First one is the examination division. These are tax auditors. Tax auditors don't carry guns, all right? In fact, tax auditors rarely meet with people face to face. Most of it's done over the phone and through the mail. When they do meet with people face to face. It's over pieces of paper and stacks of canceled checks, right? Number two is the revenue officers. Revenue officers are out there collecting tax assessments. Now, again, most of the tax collection that goes on in the United States is done electronically. It's done through what the IRS calls its automated collection system, and it's not done face to face. It's done through automated wage levies, automated bank levies, and so on. But in high dollar cases, revenue officers will go out and they will knock on the door of a taxpayer and they will say, hey, we're here to collect the tax. Those people generally don't carry guns either. Then you got the third functions, which is the criminal investigation division. These are the people that investigate alleged violations of the tax statutes and the financial statutes of the United States. And these will be folks that are helping Homeland Security.
These would be the group of people that they would send to the border, send on the cartels.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be doing the gang work and so on. Auditors, of course, will be tracking the money and figuring out what the revenue stream is and so on. But it's the criminal investigation. And Josh, there's only, of the 85,000 employees in the Internal Revenue Service, there's only about 3,000 special agents. And these are the ones, they execute search warrants, all right? They make arrests. They do that sort of work. And so those are the ones that carry guns. They're the only ones in the IRS that carry guns on a regular, ongoing basis as part of their job.
What did they need all that ammunition for? They just use it and they needed to re-up? Did we ever find out, or are they just stockpiling bullets?
Yeah, I think they stockpiled it. Look, and I'm not in favor of tax collectors having all this ammunition, but the fact of the matter is they're not breaking doors down and shooting people. If there is a raid, special agents will execute the raid. That's true. They do it in connection with the FBI generally, not always, but generally it's a joint IRS FBI situation where they will raid some place. But you know, it's pretty unusual for them to execute these raids. If they do execute a raid, it's a search warrant. You know, they'll come to somebody's office that's under criminal investigation and they'll flash their warrant and they'll seize the file cabinets and the computers of the business that they think is subject to that they think is carrying on tax evasion activity. So it happens. There's no question it happens. But IRS involved in shootouts, not that I can ever remember. FBI, of course, but IRS, I don't think so.
The next point here is the president is on the butt end of a lawsuit over Doge trying to get access to the IRS's payment systems database, and I understand a court has declined to grant access of that system. First of all, what is the Treasury's payment systems database?
This is a good question because there's a lot of disinformation out there about the IRS's payment systems database. Misinformation is that Doge is going to get access to every individual citizen's tax records, and they're going to be able to comb through those tax records and figure out who's paying what and what citizen is filing what tax return and what their income is and so on. And that's just simply not the case. The payment systems is the Treasury Department's accounting systems. They're obviously digital accounting systems that track all of the payments that the U.S. Treasury makes. Now, the U.S. Treasury makes tax refunds to people. That's true. And there are several million tax refunds, roughly 80 million, 90 million tax refunds a year that go to citizens, no doubt about that. But the Treasury system, the payment system, also tracks every other payment made by the U.S. Treasury. Josh, there's 1.3 billion individual payments that are made by the U.S. Treasury every single year to various vendors for various things, right? The Treasury pays employees. The Treasury issues tax refunds. That's true, but they also pay every bill that the United States of America incurs is paid through the Treasury Department, and those bills are tracked through the Treasury Department's payment system. So it is a natural consequence of an internal audit to want to look at the Treasury Department's payment system. Treasury Secretary Bessent made it clear that the data that was delivered pursuant to the request was read-only data. They didn't have the authority, the auditors did not have the authority to go in and change anything or manipulate data or move it around in any way, shape, or form. And so these auditors are looking for this payment system to be able to figure out exactly where the money is going. But it's no different than and see, this is what's so astonishing about this. When the IRS does a tax audit of a business, they want to see the bank records. They want to see the transaction. Where is your money going? We want to see the income flowing into the business, and we want to see the expenses flowing out of the business. And that's what this audit is looking at, and that's why they want to look at the payment systems database.
It is a beautiful melodic irony of the fact that everybody on the left is freaking over what is essentially an IRS audit of the government, of every aspect of the government. Doge is putting on their IRS auditor cap, doing the auditing, and everybody everybody hates it. Now imagine if they put that energy into actually abolishing the IRS.
It's astonishing to me that the left in 2022 was willing to fund the IRS to the tune of $80 billion additional dollars in supplemental spending over 10 years, specifically earmarked to increase the IRS's staff by about 87,000 employees. In other words, hire 87,000 IRS workers over that 10-year period of time, to use the vast majority of that money, roughly 70% of that money, for law enforcement, tax law enforcement. That is to say, audits and collections in particular. The left was willing and able, very, very joyous at the opportunity to fund that additional spending and that IRS attack on American citizens and businesses. And now, when an independent agency wants to come in and audit the IRS, they are apoplectic. They are absolutely beside themselves with anger and fury. The shrieking, the word you used, shrieking, best describes it. How dare anybody audit what they're doing when they wanted to spend $80 billion to audit what American citizens and businesses were doing?
Every single America was going to be on the receiving end of what is happening to every aspect of the federal government right now. And it's just, it's joyous to watch this happen. I actually got breaking news a few hours ago that DOJ officials are entering at IRS headquarters as we speak. So things are happening. I could speculate. We could speculate on what's going to happen next, but ultimately, I'm just
we got to keep our eye on the news. That's for sure, because it is remarkable about how outraged the left is that anybody dare look into their financial practices to see what's actually going on with the $6.5–7 trillion of federal spending that's been happening over the last few years. And here's the other thing that's remarkable. You know, if you ask 1,000 people, Josh, and we see this with what's going on with spending lunacy that's come to light here in the last. Let
me pause you right there, just because I want to inject this idea that I don't know how anyone can ever fall for the idea that the rich just need to pay their fair share ever again after seeing the line items of absolute waste that they are using American taxpayer dollars for.
Well, that's a good point, and it really is even worse than that, because what happens is the rich are not the ones that are in trouble with the IRS. When a rich guy gets a tax bill, he appeals it, he takes it to tax court, he fights it as best he can with the legal and accounting talent that he's got available to him, and he gets the bill down to its lowest possible level, and then he pays it off. When middle income people have trouble with the IRS, they don't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury of hiring hotshot lawyers. I've helped thousands of individuals and small businesses, there's no doubt about that, but I'm just one person, and not everybody out there knows about me, unfortunately. But the reality is, people think to themselves that they can't fight back. They think to themselves that it's cheaper to lose when you're dealing with the IRS than to win, to roll over and pay them. But the problem, Josh, is typical middle-class people, small businesses, individuals, mom and pop operations don't have the luxury of being able to just write a check.
That's true.
So those are the ones that fall under the IRS's thumb of tax enforcement, wage levies, bank levies, property seizures, and tax liens. And I'll tell you what, it grieves me to the core to see the IRS pummel the American people, grind them into financial powder because they can't pay a $12 or a $20 or a $50,000 tax bill, and then to see what the federal government is doing with the money, literally squandering the money that people are bleeding from the ears to pay to the government. It is so fundamentally outrageous and immoral to use that money in that fashion when the American people have worked so hard to earn it. And when they have to pay these taxes that they can't afford, they literally have to put themselves into a position of having to either pay the tax or feed their family. And that is immoral. DOJ has got to go through there. They got to look at these payments. They got to look at these various entities. They got to figure out where the waste, fraud, and duplication is, and they got to get rid of it. And the waste, you can't tell me that in a $6 trillion federal budget, there is not a significant amount of waste and duplication. Set aside the fraud, for example, and believe the best about our fellow man for just a minute, however foolhardy that is. The waste and the duplication alone has to be worth 20% of the budget. I just have to believe that it is.
And when you tie, especially when you tie the military in there, and every military service member, God bless them, that I've ever talked to will tell you that the waste inside the military budget is actually out of control as well. So permeates every aspect of the government, and there's no question about that.
And I'll tell you this, the provision of a national defense, the funding of the military is one of only 3 of the legitimate functions in the Constitution. So I'm 100% on board with funding a strong military, no doubt about that. But I am completely convinced that deep cuts could be made into the military budget without affecting national defense and military readiness one iota because of
I
the
believe
level
that.
of waste going on.
I absolutely believe that. There's no question in my mind that that's the case. And because of the lack of transparency, which of course is a symptom of the bloated bureaucracy that we have, because of the lack of transparency, people they just get away with it. They just get away with it.
That's exactly right. The lack of transparency is what allows this to happen. It's not just the budget items, but the function of the federal government bureaucracies, the Internal Revenue Service, for example, the Treasury Department, the Social Security Administration. These things are so large and so cumbersome, and they have so many pages of rules and regulations and guidelines and so on. The average person simply cannot work their way through it. And so as a result of that complexity, they just believe that they can do anything they want, and they're not answerable to anybody. This is the fourth branch of government that our founding fathers never intended. This administrative branch of government, three-legged stool in terms of our system of government. We got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, and there's very sophisticated, brilliant, in my opinion, checks and balances that are built into the Constitution to check against all these different things. But along comes the Congress in the early 1970s. They passed the Administrative Procedures Act that creates these federal agencies that essentially takes all three components of the federal government, executive, legislative, and judicial, and wraps them into one function known as the administrative agencies. They write their own rules, they interpret their own rules, and they enforce their own rules. And Josh, that is the definition of tyranny.
It's pretty absurd that they were able to get away with that, and for what now, 50 plus years of
it was early 1970s. So yeah, we're talking 50 years.
50 years of this insidious festering going on, and now finally it's all coming to light. So
Yep.
I guess basically we just keep an eye on the news and see what happens next. It's all going to happen very, very quickly, and hopefully they do something about it this time instead of just sweeping it under the rug like they did last time. But who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. But for now, where can they find you?
I'm on all the social media outlets. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. I'm on True Social at Pillow Talks Taxes.